This is an interview of Wilhelmina Goff on June 5th, 2021 via video conference from her home in Mitchellville, Maryland. Wilhelmina Goff will be describing her life story, including experiences at Asbury United Methodist Church, senses of how Asbury has fit into Washington, D.C. history, and her connections with Washington, including work for the National Council of Negro Women, Delta Sigma Theta, and as an educator for decades in the D.C. area and elsewhere. My name is Adelle Banks, and I am honored to have the opportunity to interview you today. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview and your willingness to do this. It is sure to enhance the archives of Asbury, as well as the archives of the DC Oral History Collaborative and the DC Public Library. You will be able to review this recording in the future, and you have the right to refuse to answer any question asked today. Have fun with your memories. I look forward to hearing some of them. Please tell me where you were born and a little bit about your earlier years.
Well, I was born in Columbia, South Carolina. I was born at the one hospital that they had for, at that point they said Negroes, which was Waverly Hospital. I often tell people that I went to college before I went to school, because of the fact that when I was a little girl, I lived across the street from Benedict College, and they used to have a nursery school for Benedict and Allen University together for a practice opportunity for persons who were taking education as their majors in college. So my first years in school were at the Allen and Benedict Nursery School. And, during that time, they didn't have kindergarten. So when we left the nursery school, we went straight to first grade. And I went to Carver Elementary School at that point, from 1st to 8th grade. And I went to C.A. Johnson High School, which was almost like a private high school at that time for, quote, Negro children, because it had such high standards. And the teaching there was just high quality. They were outstanding educators that encouraged us. And it's always interesting to me to know that no one was ever considered dumb in those schools, at my schools at that time. You worked and you passed. And my high school class consisted of 162 people. And the interesting thing about that was that out of 162 people, 158 of us went to college. And most of us finished. And the others went into the military. I came to Asbury.
Before we go into Asbury, please, I want to ask you a little bit more about your life in South Carolina. First of all, can you tell me a bit about your parents and their names, please?
Okay. Well, my mother was an elementary school teacher, and her name was Katie May Hare, H-A-R-E, Goff. My father was William Earl Goff. My father was really, he was really an engineer, and because he worked for General Electric, and the switch boxes that are on the walls now that we switch the lights on and off, he was a part of developing that and putting that switch box together. He also was very instrumental in working with General Electric at that time when they made the electric stoves, and the women were getting shocked a lot of times when they were using the stoves. So they were trying to figure out why were they getting chopped. And what was happening when my father would go out, because he and his brothers were working at Perryman Electric Company, which was GE. When they would go out, they discovered that what was happening was roaches was crawling up into the control boxes, and they would eat on the wires, and that would cause the women to get chopped. So he was instrumental with GE in clearing up that particular problem. One of the interesting things about both of my parents were that they were always activists. They were civic activists and worked for causes. As I told you, my mother was an educator, but she was very, very much involved in the development of, now we say Black children, but Negro children at that point. And she was a member of Sigma Gamma Rho sorority. So she was a part of developing a scholarship program with her local chapter. And she was the president of the high school PTA when I was in, well, not only the high school PTA, and she was also president of the Carver Elementary School PTA. Mother was also a writer. I have plays here in my house that she wrote, and they were never published, but they did productions. The parents did productions at that point and raised money for the schools, for the high school, for the elementary school, for the extra things that we did as children and as young teenagers.
So there was a PTA that helped your development, what we now call PTA, Parent Teacher Association.
Yeah, it was.
There was a version of that.
No, it wasn't a version. It was called Parent Teacher Association, and she was the president. And she started a scholarship fund at C.A. Johnson High School, because she felt that, you know, some of the students needed money to go to school. And one of the first scholarships that was given to one of my classmates who was a paraplegic, and he, Ernest Simmons, and we used to carry him around like a baby from class to class, and he graduated with us. And he went on to South Carolina State College at that point. He ended up going to, I think it was Ohio State, because I saw in Ebony magazine where he was an outstanding attorney in Columbus, Ohio. So, and when I saw that, I said, wow, my mom had an impact on what happened with him, because of the fact he got an opportunity to go on to college and to realize his dream. Plus, he was an outstanding artist too. Now, Daddy's story was very, very interesting too, because he was one of the first Negro men to be able to vote in Columbia, South Carolina. And if he was around, he would tell you what happened. He would tell you that at that time, when they would go in to register for vote, they had to repeat the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment of the Constitution and explain it to what they call the registrars. Well, Dad and his friends learned it. My father knew it because his major in school was history. In college, he majored in history. So he knew it, and they worked together and were able to talk about and tell what it was all about. So they would go up and try to register. And each time they would go in to register, they would pass the test. And then they would tell them they couldn't register because they had to have three registrars to sign for them to be able to vote. And each time they said, well, we don't have a 2 here now, and we're sorry, we cannot register you to vote. I don't know how many times they went back, but they never gave up. And they went back, last time they went back, they did what they had to do. They said, well, we still don't have we don't have 2 registrars here, so you can't vote. So Dad said, well, now that's strange. The last time I was here, this man and that man was a registrar. The next time I came, it was that man and that man that's a registrar. So I see all 3 of the registrars here present. So you need to sign us up, because all 3 of these men were here. So at that point, Daddy, J.C. Ottomus, I don't know who else it was, I can't remember now. They got their registration cards. And I still have Dad's here in the house. And he was very proud of that. And he voted constantly until he was 94 years old.
Thank you for sharing that story. So your parents clearly had to deal with segregation. Do you have any personal memories of that time of your life dealing with segregation yourself?
Well, just about one, none really, because our families lived kind of protected, okay? We as children were protected from the evils. The one that I remember was that one day I caught the city bus to go home. And Mom had told me, said, now, you sit back in the back. Don't try to sit down in the front. And so when I got on the bus, there was like a seat and it had like railings, that separated the back seats from the front seats. So I sat in the seat that was in front of the railing, because I considered that the back, And I must have been about 14 to 15. And so as the bus got crowded, the bus driver, when somebody got on, this lady got on, and she told him, I don't have anywhere to sit. So he came back there to me at that point on the bus. And his thing was to me, nigga, move to the back of the bus. You have to move to the back of the bus or you have to get off. And so at that point, I didn't try to fight it because I was by myself. So I got up and I moved to a seat behind the pole. That was one of the biggest memories that I have about it. Another time, I guess another one was that I always drove my father because he was legally blind and he did not drive. So he had to do something, and I drove him out in a section called Forest Hills in Columbia, which was all white. And when we got ready to come back home, he said, I'm gonna stretch out here on the back seat. And I said, okay. He said, because I'm tired. I said, okay. So I was driving and it looked like I was in the car by myself. And these white boys kept bumping my car. So I sped it up so that they would not, we wouldn't have an accident. So I was driving a little bit faster. Well, I didn't see the policemen, but they did. So they shot around me. And so then when they did that, the policeman stopped me and he said, why are you driving so fast? I said, well, those boys kept hitting the back of my car. And I was trying to keep from being in their way for them to hit my car. He said, well, you're not supposed to be driving that fast. And so my father sat up and he said, they were bumping the back of her car. Did you not see that? I didn't see that. I didn't see that. So I'm giving her a ticket. So he gave me a ticket for $25 at that point that I had to pay because, and of course, you know, that was points off of my license. Well, you know, in South Carolina, you could get your, at that point, you could get your driver's license at 14 if your parents signed for you. And they did, so I could drive daddy. I guess another specific part of segregation was, at that point, Dad had left GE and he was working at the University of South Carolina. And my first cousin, who was Vivian Goff, my father was kind of fathering her and helping her because that was his brother's child and his brother was deceased. So when she got ready to go to college, she told Daddy she wanted to go to college. And he said, okay. And he said, well, they tell me that any child of mine can go to the University of South Carolina. So he went into his boss and said, my niece, who I am taking care of, is going to the University of South Carolina and wants to go to the University of South Carolina. And he said, so what do I do to get her registered? Well, see, you know what they did, and this is why Daddy did this. If that person's child was a Black child, they'd tell them, well, no, you can't go to the University of South Carolina, but you pick any school you want to go to. So what happened was they paid for my cousin Vivian to go to Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio. And they paid for her to get her bachelor's and her master's degree. So I guess those are some of the pointed things that I remember, except, well, maybe one of the other one was Daddy and his brothers guarded Thurgood Marshall when he was doing the case, that famous case in South Carolina.
What did they do with Thurgood Marshall?
They guarded him at where he was staying. They made sure he and his brothers and a couple of other friends that nobody, that, you know, none of the Ku Klux Klansmen or anybody could come in there and bother him at that time.
Thank you so much for all those memories. That's really, really interesting. I'd like you to tell me about your college years now. Did you leave South Carolina to attend college? And if so, what was it like to travel far away to go to school, first of all?
Okay. Yes, I could have, at that point, I could have probably, Daddy was working then at Allen University. And I could have gone to school free then, but I didn't want to go there because he was working there. So he said, well, he and Mom said, pick out wherever you want to go to school. So my choice was Talladega College in Alabama. And my father said, no, that's not a good choice. You tell me how you're going to travel. So I said, well, I would take the train. And by the way, the train is in the African American Museum here in DC now. And I think you can see how it was set up, where the Black set in the back and the white set in the front of the car. I would have to take the train there. And then when I got to, I've forgotten where it was in Alabama, like it was like Mobile or Birmingham. I would have to get off that train and then go to the bus station And the train got there about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I would have to go to the bus station and wait until 7 a.m. in the morning before the bus came to go to Talladega. And so my father said, oh no, you're not going there. So he said, pick out another school. So
was he concerned about your safety? Is that
he was concerned? He said, you are not going to be sitting up in any bus station by yourself and some white man comes and rapes you. He said, we're not going to have that. So that ended me going to Talladega. So he told me to pick another choice. And so I ended up picking Morgan State because guess what? We had the musical competition for high schools. And Dr. R. Hayes Strider, who was the director of music at Morgan at that time, was a part of that. And I was playing my clarinet as a part of the competition. And so I spoke to him. I said, oh, I'm coming to Morgan State University. It was Morgan State College then. And he said, oh, really? And I said, yes. And he said, well, how would you like to have a scholarship to play on the band? So I had a four-year scholarship to play my clarinet on the band for Morgan State. And that was a wonderful experience.
At Morgan, you were involved in the student sit-in movement. What specific conditions were you trying to improve, and how did those efforts go?
Well, they went very well. Let me tell you. There was a shopping center across the street from Morgan. They had what they call a 5 and dime, the drugstore, and they had lunch counters in there. There was the May Company at that point there, and there was the Northwood Theater, and there was some other stores, but those 4 things I specifically remember. And we couldn't go and sit down at the counter and buy a hamburger or eat. You couldn't go in the May Company and try on clothes. If you went in there to shop and you picked out something, you couldn't try it on. You would have to either take it and hope it would fit and forget it, you know. And the theater, you couldn't go to the theater. We had to go all the way down to Pennsylvania Avenue in Baltimore to go to the theater, which at that time was a high crime area. And we did not want to go. So we decided that we were going to picket and break this, because we felt that we shouldn't have to go all the way downtown, catch a bus, go all the way downtown to go to the movie, that we couldn't go to a lunch counter across the street from the campus and get a hamburger or a hot dog. So we started picketing the stores and sitting in the theater there. And we did it, we would do it on Saturdays mainly. Every Saturday morning we would go out and we started at the Northwood, which was the shopping center at that point. Then we spread it out and went down to the downtown stores. Stewart's department store was one down there at that time. And we would sit in, a whole group of us would go in, just have a seat at the counter, and they would tell us they work on the service, and we would carry a book and read, and we would just sit and sit and sit. And a couple of times they came and from Stewart's, I was at Stewart's, they came and ushered us out towards the jail, and Mrs. Mitchell was an attorney there, and so of course we didn't get booked. And then we just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. But let me tell you something funny. One Saturday in April of 1960. We went into Stewart's and sat there. And the manager came and said, I think we better serve these kids because we're losing business. And so then they decided to serve us. Well, you know what was so funny? I had $1, and I think it was a couple other kids had some change or $1 in their pockets, but nobody had any money to order anything to eat. So one of the guys said, ran out into the crowd because was a crowd out there by then, and collected money. And they came back in and they said, order a slice of apple pie and a glass of water. So that's what we did. I think a slice of pie in 1960 was $1.25. So we ordered a slice of apple pie and a glass of water. And that's what broke that pattern in Baltimore. And you know, Morgan was the first school that started to sit in. They always give credit to North Carolina A&T, but now they've done the research, and it's now a book in the library that shows that the Morgan students started sit-in movements way before the students did at North Carolina A&T. So it was a lot of things that we broke as far as that. I wasn't there for the first thing that they broke as far as this student civil rights movement was. But one of the first things was that Morgan had become, you know, Morgan was a United Methodist school at one point, and then it became Morgan State University, or Morgan State College, and then Morgan State University. And they were getting money from the state of Maryland, but they didn't have a gym. They had to take their gym classes in an old barn. So the students went down to Annapolis, to the state capital, and sat in and said, we are a state school, and you say in the laws that all state schools get certain things, and we need to get the same rights and the same materials, the same buildings, the same equipments that all state schools, as the University of Maryland and all of the state schools do here in this state of Maryland. So that's how it started in Morgan. And that sit-in movement spread it on. And then it came to the 60s when we were doing the sit-ins. And it really, when I go to Morgan now, I stand there and sometimes I just cry because of how that school has grown and all of the things that are there, and the fact that we now own the Northwood, used to be the Northwood Mall, we now own it, and the business school is there, Earl Graves School of Business. He left money for that school to be developed. And that was the best 4 years of my life at Morgan. I enjoyed every minute.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I believe that at Morgan, you first joined Delta Sigma Theta?
Yes, I joined, I became a member of Delta Sigma Theta in December 1959. I was very active there. The chapter at Delta Sigma Theta was very active in the student sit-in movement. We did volunteer work with the children at the community centers in Baltimore. Every year on the campus, we would collect money to do food baskets for people that were in the surrounding community that was identified as being needy, and we were very active. Yes.
So when did you graduate and what was your area of focus of study?
Well, I graduated in 1962, and I got a BS degree in music education.
And did you go on to graduate studies?
Yes, I went on straight from Morgan to New York University to the School of Music.
And was it unusual at that point for African Americans or African American women in particular to attend there?
It wasn't unusual, but you know what was unique? See, I was in music, and when I got to NYU, and in the classes that I was one of two, or maybe the most three people in the school. I made the New York University choir at that point. And there was another girl named Dolores and a young man by the name of Charles. I can't think of Charles. I don't remember their last names. But we were the three. But that was a very, very rough experience because going into classical music, they didn't believe that Blacks could major in classical music at that time, some of the professors. So they were very prejudiced. And I remember there was one, the conductor, Dr. Goodhart, I'll never forget him. He would say, when I raise my hand like this, then you are to be ready to sing. And when I come down, the sound should come out of your mouth. And he would look at me and his hands would be raised. And I was singing with everybody else. And he would say, you are 1 second late. You are 1 second late. You have, that distorts our sound. And then he would also say, you cannot sing like you sing in the Negro churches. Those were the things that said. And I never will forget, I also took conducting under him. And he was so rough on me at that in that particular class that for my final exam, I had worked and studied so hard. And when I got through and went back to my seat, the tears just rolled down my cheek because I had become so devastated by the treatment that I received from him. So my mom and dad said, listen, you don't have to go through that. You know, you chose to go on to graduate school, but you don't have to do that. And you chose to go to graduate school after you went to Morgan because you didn't want to honor the scholarship that they offered you to go to Temple University from the, what's that, the program that you get the test that you take with the SAT, and it's slipping my mind now. And, you know, you would get scholarships offers from those tests. And it says, and we told you that we had money enough to send you to any Black school that you wanted to. And if you wanted to go to a majority school, that would go straight from undergrad school to graduate school. And that's what I did. But I did not get the degree in music at that time because I just could not endure emotionally what I was going through because I was majoring in classical music.
So you left your graduate studies and moved on to start your career, I believe. And if so, where did you do that? Where did you start your work and what kind of work did you do, especially if it ended up having to be instead of music?
Well, while I was in in grad school at New York University, I worked as a children's counselor at Hillcrest Center for Children, and which was a home for deprived and neglected children there. And during that time, you know, I was serving as a counselor for the kids. The kids lived on the campus of Hillcrest, and they were not taken they weren't taken per se from their parents. They weren't orphans, but their parents could not take care of them. And they were in a long-term shelter. And I did that while I was in grad. Then I decided that, you know, when I decided not to go back to grad school for music, I decided, well, I'll teach music. So I went out. I knew I could teach it because I had my bachelor's degree. Plus I had more than half of the master's. I got a job teaching music in Cleveland, Ohio, at Beehive Elementary School at that time. And I taught music in Cleveland for 7 years. And I found that they said, you need to go back to school and renew your certificate. And I said, I'm not going back to school to renew my certificate in music. So I decided to get I decided to go to school and get a degree in guidance and counseling, because I found out that I was always the kids' counselor. They would come in the music room and tell me everything, and I would talk about everything. So I said, well, I need to get some training in this. So I went to, at that point, I went to John Carroll University, which was in University Heights, right outside of Cleveland, and got my master's in guidance and counseling at that point. And then I became they said middle school, junior high school counselor. And then I was elevated to the high school counselor. And then I got an opportunity to go over to Cuyahoga Community College and work as a director of the Job Corps Advanced Career Training Program. And I did that. And I would write a proposal every year for Cuyahoga Community College. And I would get a $200,000 grant from the federal government from Job Corps. And I did that for about 3 or 4 years. And during that time, I was also the deputy executive, not the deputy, I was the Midwest Regional Director for Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. So I got another opportunity to go to Dyke College and serve as the Director of Student Personnel Services. And from there, I was elevated to Associate Dean for the Student Personnel and Services, which involved me supervising 7 different areas: the counseling area, student activities, foreign students, Veterans Affairs. I was over at the athletes, which was just the basketball team and the cheerleaders, but that was the Department of Athletic Activities, and also over the financial aid office for the student.
So what time frame was that? Around what years were that?
Let's see. Let me see. I went to, I'll go back. I went to teach music in 1964. I became a counselor in 1971. I went to Cuyahoga Community College from 71 to I think 73, and then I went to Dyke College 73, and I stayed there until I came to Washington, D.C. to work for the National Council of Negro Women.
Okay, so before we move to your experiences there and in Washington, I'd like to ask you a bit about Asbury United Methodist Church. So tell me the story of how you came to become connected with Asbury United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C.
Well, I'm not going to call the Baptist church name, but when I was a Baptist in Cleveland. So when I came to Cleveland, my minister told me which church I should go to in Washington because it was very, very much like Antioch, where I went in Cleveland. So I went to that church 2 Sundays straight, and nobody said a word to me. So I said, oh, I don't want to be a part of this church. So I left. And Grace Phillips, who was a member of Asbury, and I knew as a professional from the National Counselors Association, I was talking with her and she said, well, why don't you come to Asbury? I said, well, I'm not a United Methodist. And she said, what difference does that make? Why don't you come to Asbury? So I said, okay. And then I started remembering when my grandmother and my mother had been United Methodists. But my mother had became a Baptist after she married my father. So I came on to Asbury, and that Sunday, everybody was so embracing and warm and friendly, you know, when I was introduced. And then I looked up, and here was 2 people who had meant so much to me in my life. And that was my 4th grade teacher, who was Rachel Kennedy, and my 5th grade teacher, who was Altamay Bradford. And I just kind of felt at home, really at home then, because they were just like extended families. Our families were so connected in Columbia, South Carolina for years, you know. And to show you with Altamay, my aunt, my father's sister, made her wedding gown. So you can see how connected. My father's sister was taught home economics, and she was quite a seamstress. And so, you know, I just felt so connected. And then I looked up in the balcony, and I heard somebody call my name. This was after service. And I looked up in the balcony, and there was Mr. Harold Bradford, who was one of my father's closest friends. So that's how I came involved with Asbury.
What are some of your earliest memories besides these amazing connections you had with people who were already part of Asbury, as far as anything that you might have been part of, worship, Sunday school? Do you have any particular memories of when you first started there, what it was like?
Well, the first thing that happened with me, because I was in education, they asked me to be on the board of the Child Development Center. And I became very, very active with that. The persons that I worked closely with at that point at the center was, oh gosh, Anna, why can't I pull her name up? Campbell, Anna Campbell. And then Carol, I always call her Miss Asbury. You know who I'm talking about?
Carol Travis?
Yes. she became the chairman of the board, and we worked very close together at that point. And then I think after Carol, I must have been elected the chair. I'm not sure if that's the secret. But anyway, as the chair, I became very, very involved in trying to upgrade that child development center. One of the things that I did as a chairperson was I got all of the teachers certified as child development workers. I had a trainer who came in every week on Wednesdays and was working with and teaching the people who were working with the children. I hired one of the teachers that I knew, and she was teaching the kids to speak Spanish at that time, because she spoke Spanish, and they were learning Spanish, and they were really enjoying it. The center had been in the red at that point, and the church was doing a lot to support it. And so I did all kinds of little things, like I went to Honey Baked Ham and had a sale where we could get money from Honey Baked Ham, and we sold that. And then I reached out and got some additional grants, and got some additional money. And at that point, we bought additional things for the center. We got the rugs that had the numbers and the letters and the things on it. And because the women had to take the kids over to the park, it was so dangerous. We got those buggies. I don't know whether you ever remember seeing those those buggies where they sat about 6 kids, and they could push the kids across the street and go over to the park and play when the weather was nice and run around. And that was, I guess those are the biggest memories I remember of what I tried to do to make the center grow. And
thank you. How would you talk about your experience with United Methodist Women, including what its mission was and how you worked to accomplish it in and beyond Asbury?
Okay. Well, I was, as you know, a member of it. And my tenure as president the first time, because this is my second tenure as president of the United Methodist Women. The first time I got involved with the homeless shelter, the House of Roof. We started doing and giving supplies to that. We gave around $3,000 or $4,000 to Haiti and Jamaica when we were doing international things. One of the oh gosh, what's the gentleman's name who does did the heart? He was responsible for the heart transplants. His daughter is
Dr. Clark Callender.
Yes, his daughter is a medical physician, and when she was getting ready to go over there, we asked her what did she need, and she said, "Well, the main thing is that we're going to need medications." And so we gave her. We know we could not send stuff over there, so. And then if we sent things, the boxes might go and send. But we gave to her $2,000 to take over and be connected with the drug companies to get the necessary supplies and things for for what they were doing. That was when that bad storm hit. What was that, Katrina? No. Back in, what was that? was that 2000 something? It was a very bad storm that went through there and tore up everything. And she went through, I just don't remember. We've had so many storms lately. I'm getting old, darling.
That's okay. That's okay. But thank you for that example. And then you also were involved with the co-chaired the 175th anniversary celebration of Asbury in 2011. What do you recall about that particularly
Oh,
struck you?
I thought it turned out to be a fantastic celebration. And we had 4 days of celebrations. The first one was a day of prayer, and we prayed. It was in the afternoon, and we had someone to pray on each critical issue that we were facing in society. We had the prayer band in at that point, and from up in Annapolis, Maryland, they came down, and oh, they were very outstanding. We had a fun day at that point for families, and which I thought was amazing. The kids did all kinds of interesting things. And then we had the final, celebration day, which was the service. And I meant to bring the book here so I could look at it and say, oh, yes, 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 yes.
I think there were 5 days total, and there was also a play that was part of it, not on Asbury, on site at Asbury.
Yeah, right. And then we did the Pearl, and we went over to we went over to UMDC, University of Maryland, DC.
University of DC.
DC, yeah. And presented the Pearl, which was an outstanding presentation from our drama club, I call it. And it was written by oh my goodness, why can't I pull her name up now?
Dottie Williams.
Yeah, Dottie Williams. It was pulled up by written by Dottie Williams, and it was a fabulous presentation. We were supposed to have a follow-up on it, but it hasn't happened yet.
For those who don't know, what was the Pearl? Can you just say succinctly what that was?
Oh, yes. The reason the Pearl was so important to us as a church was because of the fact that some of the former members and members of Asbury had families who were trying to get on the Pearl. The slaves had a ship in which they were going to get on and try to leave DC. And two of the women that were going to get on there was their families belonged to Asbury. But what happened with the Pearl was that someone let the people, the slaveholders, know what was going to happen. And then a bad storm came by. And when the storm came by, it prevented the boat from sailing, and they didn't get an opportunity to leave the DC area, and they were recaptured. Some of them were sent to southern states or sold to southern states, and then some of them remained here in the Washington area. And there were 2 sisters who were very important as far as that was concerned, because they would sing, and they would go all over the United States singing, raising money, which came back. A lot of it came back to Asbury.
Thank you. I'm wondering if there are any pastors or that you remember most, and why, in the time that you've been at Asbury?
let's see. I joined Asbury under Reverend Hutchins, okay? And I remember how dedicated he was in trying to keep things going, even though he was very, very ill. He was very ill. In fact, he died um, during the time of his tenure. And then after him came Reverend Matthews. And Reverend Matthews was a very progressive minister, I feel. He did some things, and he appointed me to the church. What is that committee that works on the services? The church, the committee that works
Liturgy or worship committee? Liturgy or worship committee?
Yeah, that was it. Thank you. So I was a part of that. And one of the funny things with that was that for Good Friday, the committee asked me to coordinate the fish dinner after the service. And I got Mr. Giss to come in and do it. And I insulted Mr. Negro because he said he had always cooked the fish, and I've forgotten how many years. And I had to apologize to him because I didn't know that was an official position, that he was to cook the fish. So
that was James Nero we're speaking of?
Yeah, Mr. James Nero. But after that, we became good friends and worked together very, very closely. Because I worked with him on the trustee board when he was chairman of the trustee board.
Were there times that the Asbury community was really there for you in a meaningful way?
Well, I was just getting ready to say, when Reverend Matthews was the minister, and my father came to live with me, and we had that thrift store in which we gave the homeless clothes, and Miss Vi Brown was running it. Well, Daddy was very, very interested in helping her. He felt that he could do that. He had volunteered with the one in Peekskill, New York, where we lived in New York, and he had a notation about that in the from the President Reagan. And so he felt he could go in there and work with her on that, and that was his favorite thing. Well, when the store would close, he had nowhere. He couldn't go home because he didn't drive, so he would stay around the church, and Mrs. Matthews was very instrumental in helping me with that, because she would find little things for him to do to help and make him feel, happy in the church, because Daddy didn't need to go into a nursing home. His mind was too good, and to go and sit slumped over in a wheelchair was not him. So, and that was very important, very important. They let him stay there. In fact, most people probably don't even remember, but they didn't have anyone on the door down there on 11th Street until Daddy started sitting there and opening the door for people and finding out where they were going in the church and what they were doing. So that's how Asbury was very helpful to me. These phones, I thought I had cut it off. Tell me. I can't get I guess I can't cut this stupid thing off. All right, I got it. I'm sorry.
That's
I thought
okay.
I had got it all.
I appreciate that. But that was good timing. It was in between questions. How has your involvement with Asbury changed due to the COVID-19 pandemic? Has your work in any ministries taken on new dimensions during that time,
Um,
such as United Methodist Women?
yeah, I have been working with the
Wait,
United
could you wait till the
Methodist-
phone stops, please?
Call from being transmitted.
I'm sorry.
That's
I thought I
okay.
had turned them off, but
That's okay.
evidently I can't. I don't know.
All right, so I'll repeat the
I'm hoping
question.
okay.
How has your involvement with Asbury changed due to the COVID-19 pandemic? And has your work in any ministries, particularly perhaps United Methodist Women, taken on new dimensions during that time?
Well, I've had to be very creative to keep the group together, you know, because the group was used to getting together and meeting on the third Saturday or the third Sunday. We used to meet the third Saturday and we changed it to the third Sunday because it made it much easier for the women at that point. So I had to be very, very creative. And my creativity had to be in how can we keep the group moving and interested in things. All right, so one of the things that we always have done is had the senior Christmas dinner. And we were not able to get together. So first thought about, can we have meals sent to them and have them come online and we eat the meal? But that was too cumbersome. Plus we just didn't know how fast they would deliver. And the men said they would help us, you know. So what we decided this year was the money that we spent for the dinner, that we would give all of ours members who were 90 plus years old a $25 Visa card so that they could use it in any way that they needed to use it. And we got a very beautiful, handcrafted, these cards were just gorgeous cards for them, and put the card in there and sent it to them. And the notes that we got back from them were very meaningful because I think it helped a lot of them to do something and get something that they wanted. So that was one of the things we did. We've always done the angel tree, and Mrs. Christine Daniels has done it.
Christine
and,
McDaniel.
McDaniels, and Brenda Fortenberry, and who else is there? I'm seeing her face, but I can't. I can't think of her name now, so I'm not gonna waste time. They always have worked so hard in doing that, and we have always supported that project as a mission project. So we decided that what we would do, because of that, we would buy every child a $50 gift certificate to Walmart. That's when we surveyed the families. They said that they mainly shopped at Walmart or Target. So that's what we did. And we gave them that. And then on top of that, we felt that we needed to give each child something special. The $50 was fine because mom would take that and she might go and buy something for that child, and maybe some other child in the family, or somebody else in the family, you know. But if we wanted to give the child something is mine, so we gave each child a $10 gift certificate to McDonald's. so they could go to McDonald's and buy what they want. And that was a big hit.
Thank you very
That
much for
was a-
sharing that.
Mhm.
So I want to ask you a couple more things about Asbury's history, and then we'll move on to your career that you started once you were in Washington. Given that you chaired Asbury's 175th anniversary, I'm wondering if there's anything else you recall that's important to say about Asbury's history, perhaps specifically related to the March on Washington or its participation in other major historical events.
Well, you know, I didn't mention it before, but you know, we developed a little magazine at that point with a lot about the history and people of Asbury. And we did support the March on Washington, the anniversary march, because we provided for the participants who came in and that were part of the United Methodist Church. We gave them, what can we call it? What kind of bag? We gave them a little bag with a snack in it and a bottle of water, and so that, you know, they could be comfortable in the march. And we supported that march.
Which anniversary, please?
That was a part of the March on Washington. The last
But was
one.
it the 50th? The 50th in 2013.
Yeah, we did that.
And you participated in the original March on Washington yourself, even though you weren't here in Washington yet.
That was in 1963. Yes.
What do you recall of that?
I came from Ohio. A friend and I came from Ohio, and we drove down, and it was very interesting, and just to see. But let me tell you something that's so interesting, is whenever we have had a march on Washington, and it was by Black people, they never trashed the district. They never left any trash all on the park and made things look bad. They always had somebody there to monitor and make sure that people put things in the trash can and to pick up their trash. And that was, you know, when I was there at the National Council of Negro Women, we used to have the Black family reunion.
Could you wait until it stops ringing, please?
I don't know what it's going to stop.
Call.
Teresa, I'm being interviewed. I have to call you back. Okay, bye-bye. And it was the same person. I think I better tell her I'll call her back. I apologize.
That's
Because
okay.
this is messing up your tape.
That's all right.
What were we talking about? I lost it.
We had talked about the March on Washington, and you were relating it to the
in
National Council of
1960,
Negro Women.
yeah, I came down. And it was very interesting because I also ran into a lot of my friends who I had gone to college with all over the country, from all over the country. The speeches, and I never knew Dr. King personally, but I did get an opportunity to meet Coretta King as a person and as an individual when I was working at the National Council of Negro Women, because she came in at that point with for that. But I guess we'll hit that what that was all about later. The other marches that I participated in Washington, I did call for the anniversary march for that march.
The 50th?
And I have a certificate as a supporter for the Million Man March. I was given a certificate as a supporter for that. And what I did mainly for that was I cooked a whole lot of food and fed a lot of people. So at that point, I was living in Park Place in DC, on North Capitol in Michigan Avenue. Okay. So a lot of Norman's friends and came, and so I was the chief cook.
So can you explain who Norman is? Because we did not get to that yet. Who is Norman, the person in your life?
Norman has been my, I guess you say, companion. We have known each other. We met on a blind date in 1964 in Cleveland, Ohio. And we have been basically companions all through the years. There might have been just a very short span that we were not connected. And it was just because of distance and how things were. I was about my career and he was about his career. But we have been a support to each other all these years. And I guess a lot of people wonder why we never married. And I don't guess either one of us knows that. But he is my companion, and we are a support system to each other. And we've done a lot of things together. And when I was the dean of Dyke College in Cleveland, Ohio, he was the dean at Carnegie Mellon University. And some of my students, because of him, got fellowships to go to Carnegie Mellon University and get their master's degree. And they didn't have to pay a dime. Plus they had a living stipend. So we often laugh and say we educated a lot of children. We didn't have it. I don't have any children. And but I have a lot of them that, are very close to me because of my impact on them as a counselor.
What is Norman's last name?
It's Dr. Norman Johnson.
And the two of you wrote something together about the educational option of teaching boys alone in classrooms.
What we did was we went to Oxford University one summer. And so we had to develop a program at that point. So we decided that our concern has been for many years as to what was happening to our young Black boys and how they were educated. So we wrote this paper. I got it right here. And the title of it was Beyond Insanity, Creating a Model for New Single Gender Male Academies. And it also turned out to be a paper that was published. It's online now. I think we changed the title a little bit when we put it online. And it was through Oxford University. And as a result, I had done my EDS work, and then that gave me additional credit, which allowed me to put that with my EDS and finish up the doctorate for part of it. And
so you have gained your doctorate in part because of that?
I was certified then because of that. I have to go down and I haven't looked at that plaque in years. But anyway, I received a additional certification, which allowed me to do that. I don't have a doctorate from, but I have an ED, which is educational specialist degree, which is a doctorate. And then
When did you go to Oxford? Excuse me, what summer was that? Do you remember?
yes,
I see the paper was co-authored 2008. That's when I found it.
Yeah,
But
I
it must
think
have been
that's
before
it.
then.
Yeah, that's when we went July 2007, and the paper was published into March of 2008.
All right. Okay. So I want to move on to your more about Washington. And you mentioned a neighborhood that you lived in, but when you first arrived, which I believe was late 1980s, where did you live and what was DC like then?
Well, you know, when I first moved here, interesting enough, I ended up living in, first I came and stayed with a friend, one of my high school friends, and I was in Silver Springs, but Dr. Height's office was in Alexandria, Virginia at that point.
Dr.
So
Dorothy?
Dorothy Irene Height. And then she's also my soror. And then I moved over to Burke, Virginia. But I was coming to Asbury at that time, you know, because looking for a church, and I didn't see one over there. And I didn't know anything about Virginia at that point. So I finally purchased a condo at Park Place. And that's when I moved into Park Place. And that's right at North Capitol and Michigan Avenue, right across, almost diagonal from Trinity College and down up the street, I guess you would say, up the street from Catholic University.
So when did you first come to Washington, their first job with the National Council of Negro Women? Was your first job? What was your role there? And was that in DC?
No, it was in the United Way building in Alexandria, Virginia at that point. And then she moved to Connecticut Avenue in DC. I came in September of 1987.
And the location ended up being on which street in Washington for the National Council of Negro Women?
Connecticut Avenue. What block was that? It was near M Street. Forgot the block. Yeah. It was near what stores were, you know, there's an office building there. I don't remember the address.
And so what did you do for the National Council of Negro Women? What did you do for the National Council of Negro Women?
I was the director of programs and development. And as the director of programs, I wrote proposals to raise money for the National Council of Negro Women. One of the proposals was for a program that they had for young girls called Sisters United. And I think that I must have got close to $2 million in grants for that program. I also supervised the New York office, which is on 777 United Nations Boulevard. Interesting enough, you know that is the United Methodist Women's building. And Dr. Height had an office there. I think it was the 5th floor. And then for that, I supervised the programs that she had in there. One was the seatbelt program. You know, she got the grant for the seatbelt, and that's how they got the training done. And Fanny Munlin was the director for that. Also, that was
Excuse me, what do you mean by the seatbelt program? What was that exactly?
That was the car seats. The car seats, the belts to lock your car seat. The government had asked her to write I am crazy. This phone is driving me crazy. Can you cut it off and cut it back on? And
I
let me see.
actually think it would be best for me to just keep the recording going. So please try to stop it and we'll just.
I'll call you back. And then the seats for the children's seats, putting the babies in the seats and locking them up in the seats. Well, that program was developed by the National Council of Negro Women, because Dorothy Height had gotten the grant for that. So I was a part of supervising that and helping to organize people to go around the country. We call it a train of trainers, to train people to do these different things. And one
So
of the
you help, these are children's car seats, the car seats that are put in the back of a car to help protect an infant, but instead of them sitting on the seat and being in a more dangerous position.
That's right, the car seats. And then the next biggest program that I did was a radiothon for Dorothy Height, in which it was on Mother's Day, and Bill Cosby's promoter worked with us on getting all of these celebrities to participate on tributes to mothers. And it was a radiothon, and people pledged money to the National Council of Negro Women. That's why I was trying to get in touch with Alexis Herman, and I could never get anybody who could give me the number. I know she still works. Her office is in the National Council of Negro Women's building on Pennsylvania Avenue.
So it moved to Pennsylvania Avenue after the time you worked for them?
Yes.
Let me
see. I didn't work in the building. I didn't work for her. No, I didn't work for her in that building. I have done volunteer work there. And one of the things that I did as a volunteer for her there is we had the United Methodist Women had raised money at Asbury on Women's Day in support of the National Council of Negro Women. And our membership gave money. We gave about $1,500 to the National Council of Negro Women at that point. But I wasn't working there. I was that one is a block code. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I have tried. The only thing I know to do is to unplug the phone. And this is
if you unplug the part that you're holding, would that work suffice?
It's this is a cordless one, so I have to go to the main thing and unplug.
I see. Okay, well, I think we'll just keep going. That's all right.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Okay. I thought if I put it on mute, it would stop, but it didn't.
I had a couple other things I wanted to ask you about that, but if you want to complete your thought first, go ahead.
So I was just saying that I did that while during the time my tenure as president of the United Methodist Women, the first time that we supported the National Council of Negro Women at that point by giving money, because Mary McLeod Bethune was a member of our church, and also Dorothy Height came to our church. She was a United Methodist woman.
I was going to ask whether during your work at the National Council of Negro Women, given that it was founded by Mary McLeod Bethune, who was a member of Asbury in the 1930s, if you ever learned about anything more about her connection to Asbury.
I never learned about her connections per se to Asbury, but what I do remember that I learned was that it comes back to me. My father said that Mary McLeod Bethune tried to recruit his sister to participate with her in the development of her college, Bethune-Cookman College. I do remember him saying that about his sister Hazel, who lived here in Washington. That's how I got to love Washington. So, because I used to come back and forth and visit with her.
And I understand that part of your job involved testifying before Congress on matters of concern of the National Council of Negro Women. Is that something
Yes.
you did a number of times, a couple of times?
I did a couple of times. I went forward and testified concerning the Mary McCall Bethune Daycare Center that was in Jackson, Mississippi. And going up before Congress and telling them why it was necessary for them to provide money to these schools, programs, I should say, kindergarten programs, nursery schools, daycare centers for parents. And that was about 1989 that I did that. I did testify for Congress at another time, but at that time I was working at Delta Sigma Theta.
Okay, we'll get to that in a
We'll
second.
get to that one later. The other thing I was a part of, I did work with Dr. Height on the first 3 years. She brought me in to develop the education program for the Black Family Reunion. That's what she hired me to do, and to work with the American Association for the Advancement of Science program. So, and I did. And we would have a technology and science training informational program. And we also worked on getting a grant at that time for working with women who were in the field as secretaries and who did not want to move towards using computers. They were frightened of computers. And so then we had a training program to tell them that there was no fear about learning this new technology, that if they wanted to advance, they needed to get into using computers. And so that was one of the programs we had across the country with it.
Can you explain, excuse me, the Black Family Reunion, just briefly for those who might not be familiar?
Okay. I think that was a fabulous, fabulous idea of Dr. Height's. And she had Procter & Gamble fully funded it. And they brought in their products, which was a good advertisement for them. But what they did is it was like a big fair that was held on the grounds of DC, of the Capitol grounds. And each pavilion provided a different type of educational program for Black families in Washington, DC. Education, health, understanding insurance, understanding mortgages, and all of the things that they needed to. So many things, and I don't remember them all, but the education, the health, and the mortgage, and the insurance, and getting resources for the children. And we even had some of the colleges and universities to do presentations at that time.
All right, thank you. And so what was it like to work for Dorothy Height, who was the president and CEO of the National Council of Negro Women? Did you learn something from her, a particular lesson or two that have stayed with you throughout the rest of your life?
Yes, I learned a lot from Dorothy Height. You know, Dorothy was a very creative woman. She was a very brilliant woman. One of the things I learned from her, that you have to really, really be a good manager, financial manager, that was not one of her strengths. You know, and I learned, that was a lesson that I learned, and I had to work very hard with her to sometimes understand we can't just spend this money like this. We're gonna have to do what it tells us to do, because she would come up with a new idea and be off and gone. I learned she has written an excellent book on management and supervision. You know, Dr. Height she was an interesting personality. You know, as I said, she was very creative, and but one of the things I learned that you don't get on her wrong side. You don't get on your wrong side. But and I loved her dearly because of her creativity, her outstanding ideas, and she was a motivator. And she, you know, and I'm saying this in a very high standard. She was a master manipulator in that she could get people to do things that she wanted to get done. And she was a great influencer. She was able to influence people from all over the world about things, and even the international programs that she had while I was there. And she started that magazine called Sisters. And I was just in hopes that it was going to continue. In fact, I wrote an article in that particular magazine on, this is interesting, parents are children's first teachers. And I wrote an article in one of the issues of that magazine. I think it was the very first one.
So what did you do after you left the National Council of Negro Women? What came next in your career?
After that, you know what I did? When I left the National Council, because I didn't know at the time that I was going to leave it, I said, well, I got to do something to support myself. I said, oh, I think I'll start my own business and help people write proposals and consult with them that way. And I started my little company called WG Resources Plus. I rented the 3rd floor of the Lynx building at 12th and Massachusetts Avenue. And out of that, I had several contracts. One of the contracts that I had was through the Department of Education, in which I went in and tested 8th graders in mathematics. And I did that in collaboration with, oh gosh, what was the company? Western Incorporated. And then I wrote several proposals for the Delta Research Foundation, Education Foundation. And one of the proposals that I wrote for them that was very good, it was about protecting yourself from fire and fire hazards. And they implemented that training program at one of their national conventions.
This was for Delta Sigma Theta?
Well, see, the Delta Sigma Theta has a foundation called DREF, the Delta Research and Educational Foundation. And I wrote the proposal for DREF. It's DREF. And so they got the money and they implemented that. Then I had, at that point, I had a contract with the state of Maryland. And I started out with that through the National Council of Negro Women. And the lady found out that I was leaving them, and they gave me a contract to write a proposal on educating people about AIDS. And we had a program to train the trainers. And it was conducted out of St. John's Baptist Church in Columbia, Maryland. And at that point, I went around the state training people and getting them to understand the effects of AIDS on African Americans, and particularly focused in on women, because Black women were picking it up so quickly at that time because of what was happening in the community.
What time frame was this?
Let's see, 87, 80, this was about 89, 90.
And so then you moved to Delta Sigma Theta?
Yeah, well, what happened was I was finishing up some of my work at Delta, with the grants that I had. So I was in the process of looking for some more contracts. And what happened was the national president, Yvonne Kennedy, called me and asked me what was I doing. And I said, well, I just finished up my contract with the testing of the 8th graders in DC school system. And basically I'm not doing anything at this point. And so she said, well, would you come and act as the deputy executive director so I can get through my convention for about a 6-month period? I said, okay, I don't have anything else to do, so I'll do it. And Rosalind McKinney was appointed the executive director. So the two of us went in, and this was in 1990, March of 1990, and we went in and served in connection with that. And then I ended up staying there working 9 years until his dad was still living, and I retired from there because the job was very, very demanding and the travel was horrendous. And I was home only 24 hours once a week, like for 7 weeks straight, and I felt at his age, it was unfair for me to leave him by himself. Couldn't drive a car, couldn't get anywhere, and just stuck in the house by himself. So I decided, well, I would come on out of Delta at that point. And then I said, well, I would go in and substitute teach in Prince George's County Public Schools because we had moved out. We bought a house out here in Mitchellville by then.
I want to ask you one other thing about Delta, because you had so many roles over the years, both as a employee, a staffer, and as a volunteer. Was it your work as the sorority's deputy executive director or as a volunteer that you helped the sorority develop a stronger emphasis on heritage and archives?
As a volunteer.
And why was that important to you?
Well, when I would go in and out of headquarters, I would see different things, but it was never, recorded. So I served on the Heritage and Archives Committee. And we set up a program to try to pull together all of the critical information about the sorority and get it organized and get it together. And so that's how I got involved with that as a volunteer. But I still did it as a volunteer even after I didn't do I didn't do too much with it when I was working as an employee, due to the fact that we had someone employed to handle that kind of thing at that point. But that was and I had met when I lived in Cleveland, one of the founders, and her name was Madre Penwhite. She was really what you would call the mother founder, because she was the one. See, all of the founders of Delta Sigma Theta were originally AKAs. And they wanted Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. And they wanted to participate in the women's suffrage march. And so as a result, because some of the others didn't feel like that's what they wanted to do, they pulled out and organized Delta Sigma Theta. And when I lived in Cleveland and I knew Madre and heard her talk about what she did and heard her as a person and what her dreams were as far as the sorority, it was very inspirational to me and made me, be a volunteer. So then that's when I started serving on national committees. And then I was the coordinator for the Midwest region social action training program. And after that, I became the Midwest regional director. And I am the only person in the history of the sorority that has served 3 consecutive terms. Most of the directors only serve 2 terms and some only 1. And now the Constitution says you only can serve two terms. But I served 3 consecutive terms as the Midwest regional director.
And so you made this transition from this very busy job working for them back to being a volunteer. Was that difficult, and are you still involved now?
No, well, I'm still involved now because I still work with my chapter here, which is the Washington, D.C. alumni chapter. But when I worked for Delta, I had a lot of involvement at that point, okay? I developed the AIDS educational program that went around the country. I developed Project SMART, which was a program for senior citizens on managing their medicine, their medical appointments, and keeping their medical records, so that they would know, and what made me do that was one day I went in and my dad had his bottle of medicine, shaking it like that. And he said, "Oh no, that's not the one I take." He took up another one, he was shaking it. But when you shake the pills, they have a different sound in the medicine. I said, "Oh my God, I got to find something to do. This is something that's critical because that's how older people take the wrong medicine. They little things like that." So at that point, I got a grant from the pharmaceutical company and wrote the proposal for that, and we did the training.
This was while you were a staffer.
That's while I was a staffer. And let's see now, what else did I do while I was a staffer? Was the AIDS program, the senior medical program, and then we took the AIDS program to the different colleges for the young people to have sessions and talk about it, train their counterparts about AIDS education. And let's see, what else? I don't know.
So after you left Delta Sigma Theta as a staff member, your next career move was to move to Prince George's County school system?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And when you did that, were you dealing with college with different levels of secondary, elementary? Was it all secondary? Did you do something in the colleges in Prince George's or not?
Well, when I went in to be a substitute at Largo High School, and I wanted to be the building sub because I didn't expect to be able to do anything else. And the principal looked at my resume and he said, "Oh, you are a guidance counselor." And I said, "Yes." He said, "I have a vacancy for a 10th grade guidance counselor. Are you willing to take it?" And I said, "Okay." And I took that. And as a result, at that point, my supervisor said, "You know, parents have a difficult time helping their children fill out college applications, apply for the grants, and do all the things that they need to do, and even making the appropriate decision about what school is best for them to go to." And so she said, "I'm trying to develop this program." So I said to her, "Oh, I know how to do that." She said, "Oh, you do?" And she said, "Well, let's have an appointment." So when I went back in to have this appointment, I had laid out the whole structure of the program and with the goals and the objectives and everything. And so we developed the scholarship and financial aid program for Prince George's County. It was the Prince George's County Public School Scholarship and Financial Aid Center. And at that point, Dr. Gill, and that was somebody else I could have given for you to call if I could have found her telephone number. They were getting like about $42 million to students in scholarships. And so we started working, and the first year we worked, we got up to $85 million for the students. We increased it. And what would happen was we worked on Saturday mornings. And I'll tell you this, my father was a volunteer and helping the kids too. On Saturday mornings, we worked from 8 to 2, on Saturdays from 8 to 2. Then I started getting notices from different parents. "Well, I go to church on Saturday. How can we meet you and get this to, because I understand it's so helpful." And so then the team, because at that point I had an English teacher who would read the kids' essays for their college application. I had the English teacher, I had another counselor, and myself, and a secretary at that point. And what we would do, what I did was said to the team at that point, "Well, what do you think we ought to do?" So somebody suggested, "Why don't we open up on Wednesdays from 4 to 8? And that will give those people who go to church on Saturday an appointed time to do it." Well, that program continued for 14 years. And helping, so I still get calls from people who I work with their older children and want to know, how can I help them to do this? And I said, "Well, I don't do it anymore, and I'm not up to date like I should be." But it was unfortunate that the superintendent who decided to not fund the program, and for a semester we worked and didn't get paid. And then I said to the team, "You know, we're setting a precedence, and that is that we're saying that a counselor and somebody and the English teacher should come here and work Wednesday evenings and Saturdays free. So we shouldn't do that, because that, you know, we can't set that kind of precedence." And so we wrote them and told them that we were closing the center at the end of the first semester that year.
What year was that?
We started that program, let's see. I went to Largo in 1998, and it lasted 14 years. So that would have been 2002, 2003, or which it might have been all the way over to 2006 or 7.
And so when did you retire? If you ever did.
That's the biggest joke. I retired from Delta when I left Delta. Okay.
And what year was that?
That was 98. Okay. But that retirement, I don't even count. But I retired from the public schools in 2011. Okay. I stayed home 1 year. And then they called me to work for, and I didn't put that on my resume, I didn't think about it, the Academy of Health Sciences, which is the high school at Prince George's Community College, which the students go there for 4 years and they end up getting their high school diploma and their college, their associate's degree the same year. So I worked there 5 years. And then I said, I'm not going to work anymore. And then they called me and asked, one of my principals, assistant principals, was at Madison. So she said, you used to teach music. I said, yeah. She said, can you come in and teach music for me on long term for music? I said, okay. I said, I don't know whether I remember enough music to do that because I haven't done it. I said, I don't even sing with the choirs anymore. I said, and my piano, my organ sits in my house and never gets touched. And I hit the piano maybe twice a month, you know. And I laughed and said, I said, okay. So I went over the sub at Madison. And then they called me to be a counselor to sub at William Wirt. That was last year. And also I ended up being a counselor at District Heights Elementary School. And the last place that I was before the epidemic was at Samuel Ogle. So I said, okay, I'm retired now. So I came out with COVID-19. So I'm not going to do anything but a little bit of church work and work with the sorority. And that's going to be it. Well, in October, they called me and said they needed a counselor at Frederick Douglass High School. I said, but I won't come in and work like that. So they said, you can stay home and work virtually. So I said, well, okay, if I can stay home and work virtually, I don't mind that. So that's what I have done. I've been up on this computer 7 o'clock every morning to 2:40 every afternoon. And, you know, working with the kids, college work, courses, dealing with parents. And I mean dealing with parents. It's very interesting. And now the big interesting part is I want my child to graduate, but your child hasn't done the work, you know. And or I want my child to graduate early. And
so why have you chosen to keep the work when some might prefer to put their feet up?
I guess I want to be active and keep my mind, you know, strong. Because, you know, sitting around is not good. And I think people go down faster when they don't do something. I'm not involved in something. But I can be involved now. I think it's time for me to be more involved with my with the church work and the sorority. And then my companion has Parkinson's disease, so that's, you know, he needs a lot of help. So I'm his help or his caretaker at this point.
You have seemed to have a connection in your work and your volunteer life, seeking in particular to support women and children, from the National Council of Negro Women to Delta Sigma Theta to United Methodist Women to Asbury United Methodist Church's Child Development Center. Why has that been your focus?
I never thought about it, but you're right. It has been. I guess I recognized years and years ago when I was a child, in a sense, that I saw so many women struggling to provide for their children. And I started recognizing that children were feeling the impact of what was going on in their families. And one of the things I know now is that the economic justice piece involves women and children, because if there's no justice as far as women are concerned, with equal pay, with having the appropriate facilities for themselves, their living arrangements, their children support system, instead of having latchkey children, being there to be a good parent, and they need the money and revenue, because a lot of these parents are working 2 or 3 jobs. And sometimes, one of the things, I go back to the National Council of Negro Women, I didn't mention this. I was her national coordinator for the teen pregnancy program that was connected with the Children's Defense Fund. And we did a lot of work, and that's another thing that woke me up about what was going on, these teen pregnancies. I think we have come a long ways with that, because with the training programs that we did at that point, and that's when I worked with Betty Shabazz, that just dawned on me. And she was coordinating one area and I was coordinating another. And was 3 other people, and we worked, to try to get the understanding for these kids for that. So that was something that was very, very important in my life. I think also something else that influenced it, which I forgot to mention about when I was in Cleveland, is that I was one of the founders for the Teen Fathers program, in which we were working with young men who had fathered a child with a young teenage girl, and teaching them that they needed to be responsible. They had a responsibility, and that for supporting their child and not letting that hang out there. So I guess all of those kinds of things have affected me. And I guess I saw so many women just suffering and struggling, from the schools that my mother taught in, not the community I lived in, because my friends and I always laugh and say, we were poor children. Well, how do we put it? We were poor and didn't know that we were poor because of what our parents and our families protected us and did. But there are so many that are not, so many children that are out there trying to help their mothers to survive. They get jobs and trying to do things to help their mothers survive and build a home because of the absentee fathers. And a part of that, it goes back to a mentality as far as men are concerned. And a part of that you can see right now in this country, because when they are trying to tear down the laws that protect women who have been raped and who cannot have abortions if they want to. But you know, most Black women, Hispanic women, and women of the brown race, they're not the ones having it. It's the white women that are having abortion. And that's a part of this racism, you know, because they're losing their footing at this point as being the majority race. Well, we didn't ask, that wasn't supposed to be about me, but that's my thoughts.
I just want to clarify that the education then that you were involved in so many ways that related to teen pregnancy and avoiding teen pregnancy and also related to AIDS, how much did you deal with, how did you deal with the abortion question?
How did we deal with it? You know, I never got into it I never suggested that to anybody. You know, I think that's a personal decision. And I never approached it. I never told a woman that I felt she should have an abortion. I always tried I'll give you a prime example. When I was a counselor in the middle school in Cleveland, Ohio, I had a young girl who was 14 who had just had a baby, and she and her boyfriend came with the baby to register her back in school. And I said, with my middle class views, well, sweetheart, you made one mistake, but you don't have to make any more because there's so many things that you can learn about to take care of yourself. At this point, I need to get you into a training program so that you can take care of yourself and your baby. That was always my approach. And so I put her into a vocational training program to become a secretary, which was a great vocational training program at that time. And her little boyfriend said to me, "Miss Goff," I said, "Yeah. Are you married?" I said, "No." "Do you have any children?" I said, "No." "Do you have a boyfriend?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, your boyfriend ain't no good." I said, "What do you mean my boyfriend ain't no good?" He said, "Your boyfriend ain't no good because you ain't got no babies." That shocked me. Do you know, your eyebrows just went up when I said that. But when that young man said that to me, I saw what the mentality is, you know? And so I guess I started forming my interest on the care of women and children when I heard that, because I almost fell out the chair when he said that to me. And I said, my boyfriend is no good? What do you mean he's no good? You know? So you're saying that every woman that you are going to come in contact with as a 17-year-old, that she has to have a child for you. And I said, to me, that's not a good decision or good behavior, but that's your decision and your behavior. And you need to think about, how are you going to take care of these children? How are you going to support them? Because they, as children, need support. Their mothers and the women need the support, because if you don't support them, then our world will fall apart.
Thank you. Thank you. I have two last questions, but because of all that we've discussed, there are two things I wanted to go back to. One, was you mentioned Coretta Scott King and your connection with her through your work with the National Council of Negro Women. So could you just speak a bit about that, what that experience was, how often you worked together, what the circumstance was, what she was like?
When I came in contact with her, you know, every time we got ready for the Black family reunion, because she and Medgar Everett's wife and Betty Shabazz, we always had a educational program at that time. And this program was dealing with the fact that the three of them were single parents, but people did not realize that they were single parents, but they were actually single parents. And they had formed a little club among themselves where they met and discussed things, and they had a support system. And so that was the extent of that. Then I worked with Madeline Lawson on the committee to establish the Martin Luther King holiday. I forgot about that till you asked me. You need to look at my portfolio, and then maybe you have a better.
You give me a great idea about your accomplishments. I did want to ask you one more thing about Asbury because of the recent history. Given that Asbury's Black Lives Matter sign was burned, I wondered whether you had any reaction to that piece of history for Asbury in the times in which we live.
You know, that was very distressing because to me, the Proud Boys or whoever they call themselves, they don't have a right to say to us that we cannot say Black Lives Matter and have a sign. And they don't have a right to be vandalizing our personal property. I felt that Reverend Mills made a fantastic statement, and I felt that we are very much right in trying, anytime that sign is pulled down, to be prepared to put it back up. Because, you know, we are in such a critical situation in this country at this point, because there are people who are non-trained with the appropriate philosophies. You know what I'm saying? Because some of them have been to college and some of them have been, but they have not developed or been trained with the appropriate philosophies. And I really feel that Asbury is very strong in implementing what is so critical at this time of welcoming all people and being there for anybody who wants to walk in. I think it's very wise. Yes, we should maintain our status as a historical Black church. We should never lose that, and we should maintain that. But I also think that we should not shrink back or step back from what was tried to push on us by frightening us about having a posted sign.
Thank you. Thank you. So I would like to know, of all the things we've discussed, and maybe some we haven't, of what are you most proud?
What am I most proud? You know, everything I have done, I have been very happy doing it. I think that my accomplishments as an educator has been my strongest suit. And I think that I have been able to impact people's lives and is in their decision making. and impact sometimes just helping a person to move on. I think of an instance where I saw two. At Lago, I ran into one Black young man, and he was so angry. And anytime any adult said anything or corrected him about something, he was ready to just blow up. And one day I grabbed him and I said, "Go in my office and sit your behind down." That's just how I said it. So when I came in there, I turned on some classical music because I always play that, because I found out when they were angry, if I play classical music, it calms a person down. So then I said to him, I said, "I want you to remember one thing." And he said, "What?" I said, "You were getting ready to get kicked out of school. And here you are a senior. I want you to remember one thing." And he said, "What, Miss, what?" They called me Miss G. "What, Miss G?" I said, "Sometimes you lose a battle in order to win a war." I said, "Now tell me, what is your battle at this point? What was the battle you were having?" So he said, "I was out there, I was on so-and-so that man, because he's so-and-so." I said, "Well, now what's your war?" And he looked at me. I said, "Now you think about it. What are you trying to do by the end of June?" He said, "Graduate." I said, "Now, if you get out of school, are you going to graduate?" And he looked at me and he settled back just like I'm doing. I said, "Now I want you to remember this throughout your life. Sometimes you lose a battle in order to win the war."
Thank you.
That happened twice. The other one was at the college.
Of all the things you've done in your life, what was the greatest blessing?
Oh, and I didn't even talk about that. The greatest blessing of all the things that I've done in my life is when I coordinated the group from Delta Sigma Theta as an employee. And we went to Ghana and built 40 houses for families in Ghana. And you know, I have always said that that was one of the most remarkable experiences that I ever had. And I have videotapes, a whole scrapbook, and I have pictures of me putting in an indoor bathroom in a house in Ghana. I was doing plumbing work. And the reason I was doing the plumbing work because I knew how to do it. My father was a plumber too. And I used to go out and help him because remember I told you I drove him around. So I would go and help him to do all of this. And so I helped them to put a bathroom in. And that particular time, we as members of Delta contributed money, the cost of building a house in Ghana. And I built that house in memory of my mother, Katie Goff, and my aunt, Earlene Goff. And I paid for everything for that house.
And what year was that?
That was that was the year before I went to Prince George's County. 97, did I say? 97, 98, around in that time.
And I don't think I asked you how to spell your father's name. I want to make sure I have that, please.
William Earl, William, William Earl, capital E-A-R-L. And it's the same, my same last name. And my mother was Katie, K-A-T-I-E, May, M-A-E. And her maiden name was Hare, H-A-R-E, and then Goff.
Thank you. And your age and birth date?
My birthday is June 18th. I was born, and this June, I will be 18. Now you figure that out.
Can you say it in a simpler way?
I was born June 18th, and I'll be 81 in 2 weeks. But I was born 1940.
Thank you. Is there something I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
We talked about a lot. You made me pull up things that I know I need to go and pull together, and so I'm happy with it.
Thank you. I'm going to stop recording and then we'll talk briefly. Thank you. I'm just going to stop recording.
Okay.